Welcome to the Blessed Community Church podcast series. Here we delve into a variety of subjects aimed at helping you grow in your faith and deepen your understanding of Christianity. Follow us on social media at BlessedCC and visit our website blessedcc.org for more information. We hope you enjoy the podcast and we look forward to hearing from you soon.
Well, welcome to another of these podcasts, and today, as you can see, we've got Anne Clifford here, although if you're on audio, you won't. This is actually two of us here, Anne Clifford and myself, and we're going to talk a little bit about Steve and Anne's recent trip they took, which Anne can explain a bit more. But they were following in the steps of Paul, sometimes known as St. Paul, but Paul nevertheless, and I wonder, Anne, if you could kick off by just saying, why did you and Steve undertake such a journey?
Well, we had this idea that when Steve finished working full time, that we would go on a trip. And I think we've only ever had like 2.5 week holidays in time, like most people. And suddenly we had the opportunity to spend more time. And we had the notion of going in a camper van. And we got our metal tube. So I think delivery van. It's got it has a bathroom in it, very important. And it's got a little bed and a kitchen and a seating area. And off we went. And the reason we chose to do Paul, I think I came up with the idea because I thought, let's do something with purpose. So rather than just wander, what are we doing? And came up with the idea of what about Paul and what he was doing. And I've had an up and down relationship with Paul in terms of getting to know him and his writing. And I thought it would be really interesting to go and explore that together. And one of the things we love to do is talk theology anyway. And we're always swapping books, reading the Bible, talking about these things. So it seemed like a really interesting and gave us a real depth to what we were doing. And which I thought was, that's going to be really interesting. So we read books by Tom Wright about Paul. We recommend Tom Wright in everything. Although if you want a short answer to something, he's not the person to go to. He's fantastic, his understanding of these things. And so off we went. And when we went, visited a couple of friends on our way, but when we actually got to Philippi, which is sort of in the northeast of Greece, it was really special. And by then we got used to traveling in this van, and we didn't mind wild camping, and we actually camped in the car park of Philippi. And I thought, well, if anyone asks me, I'll just say I'm waiting in the queue, despite the fact we were the only ones there. But it meant that in the morning, nobody seemed to care. This is the advantage of having your own loo, you see. And then we got in when it opened, which was something like 8:30, and we were the only people there to start with. And walking into this, it was very moving because it was something that I'd read about and loved the book. And here we were, and it is the most beautiful, stunning place to be. And all these ruins, some of which I understood and some of which I could see what it was. And they were ruins. There wasn't much really standing. And so that gave a real resonance to suddenly you read about something and here you are standing in the place from which it was written. And
you're a writer as well, so you and I read your blog as you went, which was obviously useful for you, but also obviously very helpful for us. And so reading, I think I understand where you got. For instance, if you were in Philippi, you would have read Philippians and if you were in Ephesus, you would have read Ephesians and so on. And that brought it alive in some way, did it, for you? What were some of the highlights then for you?
I think most of all, it was the air, the space in which I found myself. It was the view, looking around this area, and the view, and it somehow felt like being on holy ground in some way,
Right.
because of the direct connection with the Bible, and the notion that where I walked, so if you walked in the main area, the main forum area, for example, Paul's footsteps would have been there, and others, and I found that that very moving.
Well, it'd be difficult to overstate the importance of Paul, wouldn't it, really, in terms of the Bible itself, the New Testament, obviously, because if you want to follow, anyone listening wants to follow the story of Paul, then you obviously look at the book of Acts, which includes what people often call a conversion, but I mean, some people argue with that use of that word in that case, but he nevertheless had an encounter with Jesus, which utterly changed him. And then he went on with the encouragement of a few people, but Barnabas being one of them. But ultimately, they were sent out, weren't they? And they visited these places. And were you following one particular, what we call a missionary journey, or were you sort of including whatever?
No, we included everything from there and the places that he had been. So all the missionary journeys that included these places. So we went around all the places in Greece, and then we went into Italy, then we went down to Sicily, and then we weren't going to, well, Steve was not so keen on going to Malta, but once we were in Sicily, it was like, this is where we might as well, and this is where the shipwreck took place, of course, and this is where the Maltese, and in fact there's a big representation of Paul where they think that the shipwreck actually took place. I mean, in lots of these places, it's approximate where it actually happened, although when you're in Philippi or some of these, or Corinth or whatever, that was the place there. But if he actually went in this place, or this is where he was imprisoned or whatever, you think, well, they're not really sure, but I'm still in the place where it happened.
Sure. Well, Anne, you mentioned earlier that you've had I think you said an up and down journey with Paul. That's not quite what you said, but the idea that nobody finds Paul consistently easy, and even Peter didn't, because he mentioned it in one of his letters that what Paul writes is often very difficult, and it is. It takes a lot of handling, and we need someone maybe like Tom Wright, who's got an incredibly perceptive historical perspective on it. But tell me, did you come back having changed your mind about him in any way, or had you already sort of arrived at a place of understanding him? I mean, how was your understanding increased, put it that way?
I think because his you read in his writing, so you read in his writing about his journey, you read about him writing about in the most poetic way possible about Jesus. Stunning words that he says. You read some of the things that you think, well, what is that about? And you don't understand. You read about his depression. You read about what he's gone through in terms of the way he's been tortured. He says, well, everything has happened to me. You can't. I've been without food. I've been without sleep. I've been tortured. I've been imprisoned. I've been in all of these things. And we've actually gone all this distance with him. And you realize how on earth we went nearly 6,000 miles, I think. And how on earth did he manage to do this? Most of it on foot, probably. And he turns up at these places, and so we went to visit. What's the place where the volcano happened? And Pompeii. Yeah, we went to Pompeii on purpose to see what it was like. How the city might have been built. Now, he didn't go there.
No.
What was a Roman city like? Because that was AD 79, so it would have been like that. And they just look so permanent. They look so huge. And here he is, this little man with his couple of followers,
Yeah.
an absolute pinprick. And yet he just never gave up. And it's funny because I was doing street passes last night, walking around Ealing, and
Yes.
in a tiny way, I'm an absolute pinprick. But when I'm out doing street passes, I'm not. I'm not.
What a good
The
point.
earth is the Lord's, and I am representing the Lord. And I can only imagine again that he was in this mission with God, and to him he wasn't a pinprick. But then on the other hand, the other thing that must have been amazing is he says all that he says, and he speaks about God, and he's inviting people to come to know Jesus, and they do.
Yeah.
And they come to know Jesus in their hundreds and more.
Yeah.
And you'd have to stand back from that, and you'd have to say, well, I might talk quite well, but this can't be anything to do with me. This has to be God. This has to be the Holy Spirit.
There is reference, of course, to him not being a great speaker in person. People complained about that, but no, I think that's a very interesting point, and that he, of course, would have had no idea that 2,000 years later, I imagine it didn't anyway, 2,000 years later, there would be people still reading what he wrote. And I mean, the letters are endlessly interesting in the way that we can't absolutely understand all of them because we don't know what he's addressing sometimes because we haven't seen the letter that went the other way or what he heard.
Exactly. And it just, I just admire his grit, his determination. And the other thing is that when bad things happen to me, I start to question whether I'm doing God's will. Is this the right thing for me? I couldn't find a word about that in his writings. He never said that. He never doubted for a moment that he was following God's will. And I thought, so I came back thinking, you absolutely were an amazing man. And not only that, is the way that his background and his understanding of God, brought up as in all that he'd learned as he was growing up. Then he meets Jesus.
Yes.
And he reinterprets.
Yes, that's right.
The entire canon.
Yes.
In the light of this is what it's all about.
Yeah. This is that. That's what he said, isn't it? This, what you're seeing now, is that. But now you understand it. That's right.
Yeah. So my admiration for him, my admiration, my respect, I just thought you were absolutely extraordinary man.
Well,
without him, I would not be here.
Well, that sounds fantastic. I think he would probably repay his a lifetime study, and some people have done that, but I don't think he'll ever get to the bottom of it all, really. There's plenty to look at, everyone. You look at Acts, as I've mentioned already, but most of the letters, not all of them, but most of them written by Paul. There's some disputed ones, but don't worry about that right now. But there's much to look at with Paul, and there are other people, no doubt, who have written about Paul. But I agree with you that Tom Wright is probably a very good person to go to, and his own translation of the New Testament is well worth having, in my opinion. Well, look, I'm going to stop there, but keep your ears open because there might be another opportunity to push this further. I had a chat with Steve recently particularly about the visit to Malta that you mentioned.
Oh, yes.
His particular impressions of that and comments on it. And that might well develop into something further. But for now, thank you, Anne, for joining me in this little chat. Thank you.
That's all for this episode of the Blessed Community Church podcast. We hope you enjoyed it and found it to be informative and inspiring. We would love for you to join us on a Sunday, either in person or online. For more information, please visit our website, blesscc.org. Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to sharing more content with you soon. Have a great day.